evening and welcome to Beaufort County News and Views. I'm Catherine Glover and I'm the director of the Washington-Beaufort County Chamber of Commerce. And tonight we're speaking with Reverend Alan Hill and Jim Hackney, and they're with the Zion Episcopal Church. Welcome.
Thank you, Catherine.
We're glad to have you.
Good to be here.
Let's talk a little bit about what roles you play, obviously, in Zion Episcopal Church. So let's talk a little bit about your role, Father.
Thank you, Catherine. Well, I came to Zion in October 2021, and I'm there as a rector. I serve part-time, and I care for the parish pastorally. I'm there on Sundays, obviously, to lead worship, and we're also engaged always with looking for ways in which we can increase the congregation and reach out into the community. So this is a great opportunity.
Great, thank you. And what about you, Jim Hackney?
I'm a lay minister at Zion Church, and I'm the immediate past senior warden, which is the chief administrative officer of the church, and was in that role when Father Allen came to us. And I'm presently chair of the Evangelism Committee, which is the interface with the community at large.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit, because this church is celebrating big this year. And let's talk a little bit about the history, Jim. And you know a lot of the history of this church.
Yes. Zion Episcopal is one of the oldest churches in North Carolina. It was founded by Robert and Lucy Cutler in 1738. Incidentally, Robert Cutler was a cousin of the Reverend Timothy Cutler, who was the first rector of Old North Church in Boston. The church met in homes, a school building, and eventually an old Zion Chapel, which was just west of where Beaufort Community College is now in our present church. The church became a part of the Episcopal Diocese of North Carolina in 1823, hence our bicentennial coming up this year. Mm-hmm. Our current sanctuary building was built in 1856, consecrated on November 14th, and we've been in it ever since. We have a 3-building campus with the sanctuary building, the rectory, which was completed in 1885, and that's where Father Allen and his wife Wendy are living now.
Okay.
And then we have Douglas Hall, which is our parish hall, all as part of the church complex.
Goodness, it has a lot of history. 200 years. That's great. So let's talk a little bit about, obviously the campus has been there, or the church has been there for a long time, and it's just got tons of history with it. How long have you been there, Jim?
At Zion, I've been coming up on 30 years now. I'm a cradle Episcopalian. My father decided we were going to become Methodist when I was about 12 years old, so I spent 40 years in the Methodist Church and returned to the Episcopal Church about 30 years ago. So we found a home in Zion, along with a lot of our other parishioners who were not necessarily cradle Episcopalians.
That's awesome. And Father Allen, what brought you to Washington?
I retired for the first time in 2015 in Philadelphia. Then I went back to Newport, Rhode Island. I retired again. And in that second retirement, I had a telephone call from I had to look Goldsboro up on the map, obviously. I knew where North Carolina was. And so we were there for a year, and while we were there, we were enjoying visiting the state. And one of the places that we visited was Edenton. And my wife said, I want to live in Edenton, but I wanted to get another job. And so Zion was sort of looking for a part-time priest at that time. So it all worked perfectly, and so we arrived. So actually we lived half the week in Washington in the rectory, and half the week in Edenton. I go on vacation every week.
So it's the best of both worlds.
I think so, very much so. Yeah.
It works out perfect.
Yes.
So let's talk a little bit. Zion Episcopal Church has really gotten active in the past, couple of weeks, or a couple of years. And we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back in a minute. We're going to learn a little bit more about that. So we'll be back in a minute with Beaufort County News and Views. Welcome back to Beaufort County News and Views. I'm Catherine Glover, and I'm the director of the Washington-Beaufort County Chamber of Commerce. Here tonight with Reverend Alan Hill and Jim Hackney, and there was Zion Episcopal Church. Welcome back.
Thank you. Well,
so, Jim, you're the lay minister, and you're the Reverend Father of Zion Episcopal Church. Let's talk about something. You have a bicentennial celebration coming up.
That's right.
Let's talk about what's going to happen.
Okay, well, the centennial will be, the actual date is April the 11th, but that follows Easter Day, and it follows our famous fish fry, which has been taking place now for 130 years.
That's a long time.
That's a long time of fish, yes. So we postponed the celebrations to the following weekend, the 15th and the 16th of April. And there'll be 4 events over the weekend. The first on Saturday morning, and I'm going to ask Jim to talk about this more maybe, is the dedication of slaves' graves that my predecessor, Sarah Sachs, discovered. And the church wonderfully built a marker to honor the burial, and we'll be dedicating that formally. We'll have the Bishop of East Carolina with us, and another bishop friend of mine. So that's 10:30 on Saturday morning. At 4 o'clock Saturday afternoon, we're going to be visited by an organist from Raleigh, Bo Lloyd. And Bo discovered that the organ that he'd learnt to play when he was taking his degree for organ music was the Zimmer organ that we have now at Zion. He tracked it down, and some months back he discovered it, and it was like seeing somebody fall in love again with this music that he'd been playing. Mm-hmm. So he'll be giving an organ recital, and there'll be a reception after that. Then Sunday, of course, we have our worship service at 10 o'clock, and my friend Bishop Jelinek will be preaching at that. And at 4 o'clock on Sunday, the Schola Cantorum, which is the diocesan choir, will be visiting, and they will sing for us a service of choral evensong, which is one of the most quintessential, beautiful pieces of liturgy that marks the Anglican Communion in the Episcopal Church. All of those events, of course, will have food in them. That's good.
That's exciting.
Yes.
And you might mention the special composition that Jean Lloyd will be playing.
Yes. Jean Lloyd contacted a friend of his in Germany, a young man, Stephen I think, and he has written, specially for the celebrations, a 10-minute organ concerto in 4 movements. So this will be given to Zion on that occasion. So we very much look forward to hearing the premiere performance.
That is awesome. So is this open to the public?
Oh, I was going to mention that. We will be doing as much publicity as we can for this, and everyone is invited. This is a community event, not just limited to Zion Church.
This is great. This is very exciting for y'all.
Yes.
Y'all playing a lot of good stuff. So talk to me a little bit about the graves. Jim, he said that you might.
First of all, I think it's significant that Zion Church has always been a church with a very diverse membership. Our records only go back to about 1864 because, as we know, the Union troops occupied Washington 1863, 1864. The town was burned at the time, along with most of what was in it. Zion Church already existed at the time of the Civil War, and was used by the Union troops first as an administrative building and then as a hospital. But they destroyed the records, so our records began in the 1860s. But we do have records of bishop visits up until that time, and when our sanctuary was consecrated in 1856, Bishop Atkinson mentioned how many parishioners there were, including one African American. When the bishop visited in 1861, we had grown to 5 African American members, and we presumed that they were formerly enslaved persons who were now free. At the conclusion of the Civil War, a number of formerly enslaved people were regular members of Zion Church and were interred in our cemetery. So Reverend Sarah Sachs, Father Allen's predecessor, was very passionate about the history of the church. And so she went through the old records and found the record of the burial of 8 freed former enslaved persons by name and date of interment. And it took some doing to find the grave sites because, as you might imagine, at that time, many of the markers were wooden, and so they were lost with time. But she found a source of ground-penetrating radar and were able to find the grave location. And with the approval of the vestry and my predecessor, Kim Watson, who was the senior warden at the time, we have purchased and installed a monument to these 8 interred formerly enslaved persons who were free and members of Zion Church. And Father Allen and I went back to the Book of Rites number 1 a few days ago and actually saw that handwritten record of that interment.
I was going to say that is quite the journey.
Isn't it?
That is. And that's all happening on this week.
Yes. We began this bicentennial event with the consecration of these graves and the grave marker.
Right. So we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back and learn a little bit more about Zion Episcopal Church. Welcome back to Beaufort County News and Views. I'm Catherine Glover, and I'm the director of the Washington-Beaufort County Chamber of Commerce. I'm here tonight with Father Allen and Jim Hackney with the Zion Episcopal Church. I went straight to Father Allen this time.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about, Zion Episcopal Church is really active in the community, and you've got a long history. You're getting ready to celebrate your 200th year. But let's talk about what you're doing out in the community and how you're involved.
Well, when I came to Zion, I was aware it was a smallish community, and then I suddenly learned it was incredibly active, not only within the community of Zion, but also beyond in Washington. One of the ways, for instance, in which this happens is our regular yard sales, and they happen so much, I've almost wanted to rename Zion as the Church of the Holy Yard Sale. But people come in droves to these events. They know where, I shouldn't say this maybe, but they know where the key of the parish hall is. So when people want to bring their donated goods, they know where to come. So often I'm seeing cars arrive. And through these yard sales, over $25,000 is given, every cent that's raised, to communities within Washington. Zion also has in its budget for every year an amount of money for outreach, and that tends to be used to go beyond. So recently there was a sale that took place in Greenville at the Diocesan Conference, and over $2,000 was raised at a sale there. $1,000 went off to Ukraine, and $1,000 went off for the Turkey earthquake victims. So it's tremendously active in that way. There are many Zion members who are involved in community life in Washington, and they do this on their own accord. And hopefully when they come to Zion, they're strengthened and inspired to go back out and to serve the community. And we're always looking for new members. My prayer is regularly that we will have visitors who will become friends, who will become members. We're also, when I go to Rotary, Rotary on Mondays, I'm very proud because Jim is looking after all the technical aspects and speaks about Rotary. He's nicknamed the Professor. Anne-Marie Montague, who is the director of Eagle's Wings, she is the next president of Rotary, so she takes part. And in July, I become the chaplain of the new Rotary.
Oh, that's great.
So there'd be a triumvirate of Zion members serving Rotary, and we all know how well Rotary serves the community.
It does. And I love that your church is going out and doing things in the community. And y'all did not stop during COVID. You continued to use online options.
Well, yeah, we we were fortunate, and we've got several folks in Zion Church who are pretty knowledgeable from a technical standpoint. So we were one of the very first users of Zoom. And when the pandemic occurred in March of 2020, the first service was canceled diocesan-wide by the bishop. But we began opening the church for people to come and to be separated and to meditate. Then we quickly adapted the conference call system and then discovered Zoom. And shortly thereafter began conducting hybrid services where we had worshipers in church and worshipers at home, and there was no distinction between the two. The folks in the church could see and hear the ones at home, and vice versa. And since the beginning of the pandemic, we have actually only missed 2 services since March of 2020. Amazing. And we're still streaming our services for our many members who are traveling or who are at home and can't attend the service. And we also upload our sermons to the website. We've got a very extensive website, which is ZionEpiscopal.com. Pretty easy to remember.
And so you're obviously, if somebody wants to find out about these events coming up, more about your church, they can go see you preach, hear all about the church and what you do. Is that where they need to go?
Sure. And for folks that don't know where we are, we are 2 miles east of Beaufort Community College on the opposite side of the road. And we're historically known as the church with the white picket fence. So we're pretty easy to recognize. And because Zion has so much history, we put together a year or so ago a brochure, trifold, with our history. And we have these, of course, in the Chamber of Commerce office, along with the information about our services, which are every Sunday morning at 10 o'clock. And we conduct Holy Eucharist each week at that service.
Great. And so, if you want to wrap up a little bit about your church, obviously, Father Allen, you're here, you're loving it, you're here back and forth, and talk to me about why someone should visit your church.
Well, Zion, I've been ordained nearly 46 years in parish ministry, and Zion has proved to me to be the most appreciative of ministry that I've visited, that I've ever served. And I think that speaks to them as a very loving, welcoming community. And I noticed that when visitors come, Zion members will contact them and talk to them. And it's a very special congregation. It's a sacred place.
And I think the best way to describe that is the words of one of our parishioners who several years ago came to Zion for the first time, and his comment afterward is he immediately felt the presence of the Holy Spirit at Zion. And he's been with us ever since, he and his wife.
Well, I always look at what you do and what you do out in the community, and also your yard sales. My neighbor that helps a lot with that, and others. And it just seems like it doesn't matter how big or how small the congregation is. It's really just at the core of it what it's about. And y'all do great things in the community. So congratulations on what's coming up.
Thank you. And
so if you want to find more information about it, give the website one more time, Jim.
ZionEpiscopal.com.
Great. And so you can go check that website out. You can also attend any of the services on Sunday at 10 a.m. and also go out and celebrate. They've got a lot of rich history there, and they're doing a lot of things in our community. Thank you for being on.
Thank you, guys.
Our pleasure.
We'll see you next time on Beaufort County News and Views.